Tonight, a renowned gunsmith in Port Dover killed during a Toronto police raid. His family now searching for answers.
None of this makes any sense at all. It doesn't.
Still many unanswered questions as the SIU launches an investigation after it says an officer fired a gun during a search warrant. Plus,
I think we can do this in a very safe way.
the province beefing up COVID testing for the winter, allowing for symptomatic testing in pharmacies and take-home kits for students. And
this kind of really experiencing what it is the youth experience on a regular basis.
dozens of executives and community leaders are sleeping outside tonight, raising awareness and funds in support of homeless youth. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. A grieving family in Port Dover is demanding answers and justice tonight. Their calls come after a 70-year-old gunsmith was killed when Toronto police showed up at his home. As Lorena Redicott reports, the SIU is now investigating.
Roger Katanko's family came together to the front of his house, searching for answers.
None of this makes any sense at all. It doesn't.
He wasn't violent. He wasn't something that you should be afraid of.
They can't understand why their brother ended up shot by police while he was inside his gun shop. It happened at around noon just over 2 weeks ago. He was 70 years old and a renowned gunsmith. Families say he was well known by local police for working on their guns. According to the Special Investigations Unit, Toronto police were executing a search warrant. One officer fired their gun.
Where is the warrant? Where is it? The family hasn't seen it. I haven't seen it.
The family's lawyer has seen video showing police before the shooting.
They traveled 150 kilometers with their own ambulance. Why? Why?
The family's lawyer says police fired the shots from out here, just outside Roger Katanko's gun shop. He was inside with a customer.
That person has not been located. It's another question. Where is this customer? Who is this customer? Was it a customer?
He says Katanko and his wife had just returned from grocery shopping.
Why would they wait for Roger to get into his shop where he's a gunsmith and there are going to be a lot of guns?
One neighbor heard 2 shots.
It's hunting season. You hear 2 shots in the country, it's nothing unusual.
But then he came around front.
When I came out here and there's ambulances and they were rolling Roger out on a stretcher, pumping his chest.
The SIU has identified 1 subject officer and 7 witness officers. So far, they've interviewed 5 of those witness officers, plus 2 other witnesses. And they've sent away 1 police-issued firearm to be analyzed.
This will not be swept under the rug, and that we will search for answers, and we won't stop until we get justice for Roger.
He told me that he'd probably die sitting at his bench. But I don't think he ever imagined or thought he'd be gunned down for no reason while sitting at his bench.
Lorena Redicott, CBC News, near Port Dover.
Toronto police are investigating after a pedestrian was struck and killed by a cement truck downtown today. Now, the victim was a woman in her 60s. According to witnesses, she was in a wheelchair and may have been panhandling on the street. It happened around 10 this morning at the busy intersection of Sherbourne and Dundas. A local social worker says drivers need to be extra careful in that area.
Even driving what is the normal speed limit, other parts of the city, you have to drive differently here. You have to be more aware of your surroundings and you have to be prepared for people to do unexpected things. And so I think it needs more attention and more traffic calming than other intersections around here.
The driver of the truck remained on scene. We have new details tonight about the alleged role a Toronto police officer played in a murder last summer. CBC News has obtained police documents outlining allegations against Detective Constable Trevor Gregory. He's accused of leaking confidential police information that led the alleged killer, Gregory's son, to the victim's home in London, Ontario. Chris Ensing has this exclusive details.
The aftermath of a home invasion in London at an address the accused killer allegedly obtained from his father, a veteran Toronto police officer.
Detective Constable Trevor Gregory is facing a criminal breach of trust charge, along with other internal disciplinary offenses. Police documents allege that the officer lied to his fellow officers, duping them into running a license plate through an internal database. Gregory told them that it belonged to a vehicle that was suspicious, that was creeping through his neighborhood, but Toronto investigators say that he actually wanted the information for his son.
Police claim Karen Gregory gave his father the license plate number and told him the car owner scammed him out of money. On June 20th, 2020, Detective Gregory allegedly gave his son the car owner's name and address. The next day, the car owner, Bill Horace, shot to death in his London home. This lawyer says police services track each time an officer accesses confidential databases.
They're supposed to be using it for professional reasons only. What is not allowed is trying to get it from your own personal information for your own personal gain.
Karen Gregory is charged with murder. His father, Trevor, charged with breach of trust. He's pleaded not guilty. He also faces 4 charges under the Police Services Act.
In a bizarre turn, the man who died is an alleged war criminal from Liberia. A group that documented his crimes in Liberia told me that in death, he cheated justice. As for Detective Gregory, he's expected to stand trial next year. Chris Hensing, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto police releasing new details tonight in a drive-by shooting that left a man dead. The victim has been identified as 23-year-old Abdelmoez Popel of Ajax. It happened around 10 p.m. Tuesday near Lawrence and Orton Park Road. Police have released an image of the vehicle. Now, it is believed to be a Subaru and was last spotted traveling north on Orton Park. Anyone with information is asked to contact investigators. An update now in the case of 2 missing Whitby women. Police say the second of 2 bodies found is confirmed to be 85-year-old Tatilda Noble. Noble and her 58-year-old daughter, Ava Burton, were reported missing on October 14th after police attended a home on Scepter Place near Oshawa to check on their well-being. When they arrived, they found items that were suspicious. The women's bodies were located 2 weeks later in the township of Mariposa, about 60 kilometers north of Whitby. Post-mortem examinations have since confirmed both their identities. A 30-year-old man has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of his mother and grandmother. Ontario reported the highest number of COVID-19 cases in 2 months today, 711 new cases. Hoping to keep the numbers from climbing higher, the province announced new testing strategies this afternoon, confirming what CBC News reported earlier this week, that symptomatic testing will soon be available at pharmacies. And as Angelina King reports, students will also be taking home rapid COVID tests.
We're used to seeing signs like this, telling you not to enter a store if you have COVID-19 symptoms. But that rule now goes out the window if you have a COVID test booked at a participating pharmacy. Hundreds will soon offer testing for people with symptoms or high-risk contacts of someone with the virus. Ontario's Chief Medical Health Officer is confident it's safe.
We have over a year and a half experience now in providing assessment and testing, and we think we can do this in a very safe way.
He says rigorous guidelines include testing by appointment only in a separate space, adequate air filtration, and training. Some pharmacies could do the tests outdoors or offer take-home testing kits.
There's mixed reactions.
The CEO of the Ontario Pharmacists Association agrees it will be safe, but says individual staff can still opt out.
The employer can't fire someone for refusing to do a service so long as they refer to another pharmacist that can perform the service or another location.
The province says the number of pharmacies offering testing will go up from 211 to nearly 1,300, about a quarter of all Ontario locations. 600 are getting ready now to offer symptomatic testing within days. Some big chains like Rexall say they won't be participating. What do customers think?
I don't think it's right that people are walking through to the back of the store, which is typically where where the drug mart is.
Maybe it's not the ideal, but anything that can happen to get more people tested.
I would think it's kind of a little sketchy.
Like if they walk through with their masks on and go to a back room, it doesn't really bother me. I'm okay with that.
Today, the province also announced a new $50 million testing strategy in hopes of keeping COVID out of classrooms. It'll be handing out 5 rapid tests to each student to take voluntarily every few days over the winter break.
This will support a safe return, given the potential risk of transmission due to the increased gatherings indoors over the holidays.
There's a risk of
This
transmission to
pediatric
someone
infectious
potentially
diseases specialist
who's
praises the
vulnerable.
idea, but says it doesn't mean you can let your guard down.
In Ontario, the numbers are going up again. And so just because you have those tests doesn't mean that you should, visit with everyone you know.
She warns rapid tests can produce false negatives and anyone with symptoms should get a PCR test. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario high schools are going back to regular semesters. The change will come in February, but the province says school boards can make the change sooner with support from their local public health unit. Many boards have requested the move away from modified semesters, which saw students take 4 courses each term, alternating which classes they had each week. The system allows for easier cohorting, but students and parents have complained that the 3-hour classes make it hard to absorb and retain information. Meteorologist Colette Kennedy joins us now with a first look at the forecast. And Colette, temperatures falling quite drastically since last night.
Thanks, Kelda. I've got to show you this temperature progression because I don't know how many folks got a chance to get out there and enjoy it. But, when last night we were seeing those readings like 17 degrees, but right as we're headed towards midnight, 18 degrees at St. Catharines. And then, of course, you know the story of what happened, as was forecast, that those temperatures were falling. Still relatively mild for a morning to get up and have readings like this. However, they continued to fall as we went through the day. And so seeing those readings as we got towards 5 o'clock just to the northwest of the city, 2 and 3 degrees, and a little more temperate into the GTA. But what's happening now is with these stronger winds really setting up, we get into snow squall activity. And we do have some warnings, which I'll show you coming up, but in the lee of Georgian Bay, Lake Huron here. And at times, some of those flurries can likely make their way down into the GTA, even into the city, reducing visibility. So that's something to watch for tonight, tomorrow morning, and even to one part of the afternoon tomorrow. Otherwise, those winds dying down. 0 tonight, 6 for the high tomorrow, Kelda.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Colette. As Colette mentioned, a risk of flurries overnight with temperatures at the freezing mark. But that's not stopping dozens of executives and community leaders from sleeping outside. They're doing it to raise awareness and funds in support of homeless youth. Now, our Dahlia Ashry is live outside TD Centre where the Sleepout is taking place. And Dahlia, it's just getting underway.
That's right, Kelda. It is getting underway, and as you can see behind me, people have started rolling in. There's about 40 business executives that are here at the TD Centre. They're all taking part in this fundraising event that's part of the Covenant House, and it's organized by that youth centre. It's the 10th annual initiative, and organizers tell me because of the pandemic, many youth lost their jobs and relied heavily on the youth centre. And this immersive experience where, as you can see, many people came with their cardboard box and just a sleeping bag is a chance for them to get a glimpse into the challenges that homeless youth and risk-at youth and trafficked youth face.
There is no doubt that sleeping on the street for one night in no way resembles what a homeless youth experiences and suffers every night. But by sleeping out, we get to at least appreciate in a very tiny way what they go through, how cold it is, how damp it is, how there's rats, there's animals. And the city is so noisy at night, and this is what a lot of youth experience. But the most important part of the sleep out is less about the actual sleeping out, and it's more about raising awareness for leaders that run organizations that can help raise funds and help contribute to so many of the programs that Covenant House invests in. We're trying to prevent youth homelessness and support these youth who need anything from medical attention, employment opportunities. They need housing.
Now, because of COVID, this is a hybrid event. So 70 people are participating throughout the city. 40 people are here at the TD Centre and 30 across the city from their homes in their own backyards, including one person that I spoke with today. He's a executive director at Microsoft, and he's doing this for a third time. But this time, he's hoping that not only is it a experience to teach people in his company about the chances of giving back to those in need, but also a teachable experience for his 2 teen boys.
Experience the silence of darkness. And that in itself, it's really introspective. of what that experience could be like. So for me, it's not electronics. It's just trying to maintain the warmth and just kind of really experiencing what it is the youth experience on a regular basis.
I know, like, I'm very, very privileged, but not everyone else is. And I want to see what it's like to be in other people's shoes and like kind of experience that and like just learn from it. For us, this is just a night, as we are privileged enough to have a shelter around ourselves, but I just want to put myself in their shoes and kind of just experience what they have to go through daily.
I'm with Mark Stanton, who's the executive of Covenant House. Mark, thanks for joining us this evening.
Oh, you're welcome.
Mark, I know the night is still young. You still have about 5 hours or so to go.
Yes.
How are you feeling? What are you anticipating as the night progresses?
Well, I think I'm anticipating, a cold and somewhat uncomfortable night for most of the people here, but it's in support of an absolutely great cause. Covenant House's work to end youth homelessness in our city, and we've got business leaders from across the city coming together, giving up a night of their time to sleep out for young people who are homeless. They've raised almost $1.2 million, so it's fabulous.
There you go. Thank you so much, Mark. Yes, as you heard, they've raised already so far $1 million for the Covenant House. Kelda?
Amazing. Thanks so much, Dahlia. That is our Dahlia Ashry live for us tonight. Thank you. Welcome back. Have you ever heard of the Wellington Destructor? It sounds like a comic book supervillain, but it's actually a century-old building in downtown Toronto. And today, the city announced plans to redevelop the property it sits on. Greg Ross has the details.
This is what the Destructor looks like today. It's been vacant since the 1980s, but when it was built nearly 100 years ago, it was home to a giant garbage incinerator, a practice that has since been banned.
Horse-drawn carriages used to bring garbage up this ramp to a tipping point for the garbage.
For years, the city has been considering ideas for this historic site. Now they've picked the company they believe can take this property into the future.
After an extensive process last week, City Council approved TAS as the head lessee of this site, and their proposal to restore the site was adopted at the same time.
The plan is to turn the property into a community hub. The Destructor building itself will be split into two sections.
On the westerly side of the Destructor is a winter garden that we've imagined. So this idea of actually being able to provide a number of spaces where we're able to actually keep that year-round sort of outdoors character and vibe.
On the other side, an amphitheater and learning spaces. In addition to converting 40,000 square feet of usable space inside the old incinerator building, the city says the new plans also include the construction of a pavilion on this property in front of the Destructor, which will create another 70,000 square feet of indoor space.
We've imagined that as sort of atelier type spaces, so creative worker maker spaces that we'll be making available.
Who and what will fill those spaces has yet to be determined.
We're now at the start of a process. There's a whole community engagement piece that we'll be going through. We'll be speaking with the community in terms of what are the inputs and the insights that we're going to garner from them.
The timeline to complete the Destructor Community Hub is 5 to 7 years. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto has announced that 38 outdoor rinks will open on November 27th, weather permitting. The remaining city rinks will open a week later.
I think our concern for safety is every bit as acute as it was last year and the year before, but adapts ourselves to the fact that many of these public health restrictions are being lifted. And so the roster of programs for this year includes everything from skating to tobogganing to skiing to disc golf to snow loops and to winter tennis.
And there are more changes. Unlike last year, reservations will no longer be needed for skating, and change rooms will be available at 50% capacity. The city also doing away with online reservations for drop-in fitness and leisure swim programs by the end of the month. A live look at our city skyline tonight, partly cloudy with some flurries developing overnight. Currently feeling like -2 in the city. Let's go back to Colette now with a look at your extended forecast. And Colette, some watches and warnings in place tonight.
Well, Kelda, I promised earlier in the show that I was going to show you where we have the snow squall warnings, but also just keeping in mind many of these areas in a winter weather travel advisory. I know the two kind of go hand in hand, but it means even if you don't have the squall happening, you know, with just the slightest fluctuation in the winds, we can see those squall lines changing, and you go from having great visibility to all of a sudden whiteout conditions. So do be aware of that, and I'd like you to be aware of that even outside of these areas, because as these winds are coming from the west, they're going to push some of those streamers down towards the north shore of Lake Ontario and the west end as well. So really through the GTA we'll have that risk, and around towards even Hamilton and St. Catharines at times as well. So there's those squall lines kind of setting up. When you're outside of them, what do you get? Well, you get some clear skies, so we'll actually see some sunshine when the sun is up tomorrow through the day, as long as you're not into one of those streamers. Now those winds should back off a little bit into the afternoon hours, as they do, and yes, there's a cloud cover or another system coming for the weekend. We'll talk about that here when we get to the 5-day, but just know that those will back off, and then we'll begin to see some improvement for the afternoon as those winds get a little bit lighter, okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, as we look at some of the temperatures overnight tonight, yes, we're going to see some of those numbers falling below freezing. However, you can have sunshine tomorrow in southwestern Ontario, up to 6 degrees in Windsor for your daytime high. Westerly winds and that chance of some wet flurries and even mixed precipitation there down towards Niagara Falls into St. Catharines. Otherwise, it will most likely be in the form of light snow, and at times just be cautious. I'd say allow extra time for tomorrow morning's commute, okay? 6 degrees, otherwise is what we're looking at for that daytime high. Now that system, I said I'd get back to it, coming for the weekend. Mostly it's that cloud cover that's going to be moving in for Saturday. But as we get into Sunday, we are talking about rainfall following. So the second half of the weekend wet, and then cold air filters behind. And that's when some of that rain, Kelda, may be turning over to some snowfall.
All right, thanks so much. Finally tonight, baseball's MVP for the season has just been named, and it's Shohei Ohtani. He is both a hitter and a pitcher for the Los Angeles Angels, excelling in both positions. Now in second place was the Toronto Blue Jays' Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Jays infielder Marcus Semien was also a finalist for the award in the American League, coming in third in votes. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Shannon Martin has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.